Hi, I'm CJ and this is my RC channel. In this video I am building up the shock absorbers for the Serpent SRX8 GT 1/8 scale electric on-road race car. And this is just like any other shock assembly. They're just bigger or fatter and shorter. There's a few little things that are slightly different than a lot of shocks. A lot of shocks use E-clips. These use a bolt on the top of the shock shaft. I'm going to go through the basic process for you. I've already started one little thing. I just put the O-rings in these adjusters and put them on. I'm going to show you that now with the fourth one. You have this bag full of various silicone parts. We've got some little rubber stop. We've got some bladders. We've got our shock O-rings for the shock shaft. And then you have these large O-rings. And what you want to do is, in this spring adjuster, you want to just kind of work the O-ring into the space here at the top. And as you see, that drops right on in there. And basically, it creates resistance so that this cannot unscrew or go in either direction on its own. It requires effort. Now, because it requires effort, you need to be careful as you're putting this on. You want to make sure you're threading it properly and you're not cross-threading. So start threading slowly. And if you start to feel sudden resistance, do not force it. Back, twist, and then, level it, push it in, and start turning again, and make sure that you are threading in, as I am. And as you can see, it is slow going. It does take effort, but that's the idea. So I'll just speed this up and get through this. Now, unfortunately, I do not have the shock oil that I want. I'm building this to a specific spec. As I've mentioned throughout the videos, I'm using the build sheet of a professional racer and using that as my starting point. For example, instead of using the stock springs that come with the kit, I'm using a set of front and rear springs by a company called Ride. And there's the other one, I misplaced it. So I'm using their purple in the front and the grays in the rear, per this person's example. And the difference is you're not going to see a big number difference somewhere. That it's all, it's 2.3 purple, 2.3 gray, H40 millimeter, H40 millimeter. They're both the number 800. What you're going to see down here is total coils 6.0, total coils 5.75, and then the spring constant is different, the weight. We've got 0.58 kilograms per millimeter and 0.54 kilograms per millimeter. So the purple is the slightly softer spring, the gray is slightly stiffer. That's our rear. Okay, so let's get moving now. We're going to take our shock rods, the shock shaft, and you're going to put a washer on it, and then you're going to need a piston. Now, they provide several options. They give you these pistons, which you've got to snip off of here and try to keep them round. I wouldn't bother. I wouldn't use any of these that are on the tree. They're just not good. They're molded plastic, so they're not going to be completely round necessarily. They might be okay, but it's just not worth hassling with because there's better options. Now, in this little pack, they give us 4 individual pistons, and these, if I didn't have something of my own to use, I would be using these. These are going to be more round, more circularly perfect than these, but I'm not going to be using those either because, again, following the example of that professional racer, he is in both front and rear is using these 8-hole number the 600350. You get 4 of them in a pack. They're not very expensive, as I recall. They were maybe $4 or $5. These are a precision piston. They are CNC'd out of nylon or Delrin, and they are conical in shape. In other words, they're kind of shaped like a frisbee. They're taller in the center, and they slope downward towards the edge. And I'll go ahead, and I need to pull them out anyway, so I'll show you. And what that does is, because they're thinner at the edge, that's where the piston meets the shock cylinder. And the less material that is rubbing against the cylinder, the less resistance there is. So a smoother shock action, less chance of stiction. Okay, let's just go about that the easy way. Okay, now to show you. As you can see, it's fatter in the middle than it is at the edge. So it's like shaped like a saucer turned upside down. So what you're going to do is you're going to place one of these on here. Now there's a slight indentation there. I wonder if the washer is big enough. Nope. Gonna do it like this, and then we're gonna put on one of these nuts and tighten it down. Now this is somewhere that I would use some blue Loctite. I want to take a look at one other thing, because of the way these are cut. Yeah, see, that's still gonna lock down. Okay, I am gonna use the suggested washer. And I just want to feel how this is tightened on. Oops. Yeah, see that these are going to be solid. They're not gonna, you're not gonna have any rotation. A lot of shocks that just use C-clips, the piston can spin freely, but we're not going to have that situation here. A good set of shock pliers is essential. I actually like this type. I've had been getting by with a set that are shaped like a set of pliers where the pivot is ahead of the grip, so the grip would be out here, and the arms come across the pivot and clamp on it. And I don't know if it's the shape of the handles or whatever, it just always seemed like it required a tremendous amount of effort. And for whatever reason, this type of shock shaft holder really grips onto it. It requires a lot less effort on your hand to hold it tightly. And it is specifically sized more precisely than the one that I had, as far as how much surface area it grips. So I really like these. This is made by Revolution Design Racing Products. I just picked these up recently. So anyway, as I was saying, I'm going to go ahead and use a little bit of blue Loctite on this nut to make sure that it does not come loose, because it's going to be soaking in oil all the time. So it might be prone to that. Now, when you're handling shock shafts, I always recommend that you, even though you're hopefully using a good set of pliers like this, that you hold on to the bottom of the shaft as opposed to grabbing it midway up, because if you do any damage to the area that passes through the O-rings, you're going to get leakage, and that's just something you want to avoid if at all possible. I don't need much, just a little drop. Okay, one piston solidly in place. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the other 4, and I'll just speed up the video through this portion. I don't know why, but for some reason this one nut doesn't seem to start easily. Maybe it's got a little bit of, I'm going to try another one. Yeah, see, that one goes on just fine. I'm going to find a screw and kind of tap that one properly. Yeah, there's definitely something wrong with this nut. I think I've got some spares that will fit on there. This is why you should always keep any extra hardware. You never know when you're going to need that random nut or bolt or screw. These are just standard M3s. Perfect. It's even the same color. You gotta love it. Getting boxes like this are incredibly helpful. I've got a huge stack of different sizes. Some of them are this size, some of them are like this size. These are just basic utility boxes. Like, these are just totally generic utility boxes. These are actually fishing tackle boxes. And those fishing boxes, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 of those. This is one of my favorites for small stuff. They're made by Yeah Racing. And each of these boxes has, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 little boxes that is a row of 3 individual boxes. And one of the nice things is if you drop this and it opens, you've got stuff in these little boxes themselves that isn't going to just pop out and fall out. So they're great for things like organizing all your different pinion gears, because you can write on them. They also provide you with a big sheet of blank stickers that are little squares you can put on top of those. And I use them for all kinds of things like spacers, 1, 2, 3 millimeters, 0.5, 1.5, 2.5 millimeter spaces, different size ball studs. These are front springs for my F1 car. Different size wheel hexes so I can adjust front and rear track. various shock parts, more pinion gears. So as you can see, they're very handy. These are about $4, $5 a piece from A Main Hobby. Again, it's a racing product. So that's 2 done. Okay, that should be it for the Loctite for shock absorbers. And that nut goes in the trash. Don't want to get stymied again by that little sucker. Put it away by mistake. Okay, so our next step, we've done our shocks. Now it's time to set up the little stack that goes in the bottom here. We're going to have a like a plastic washer, an O-ring, a spacer, another O-ring, and then an end cap. And there's nothing between the end cap and the last O-ring, which is also a little unusual. Let me pull the parts out here, and then I want to talk to you about something else. Okay, washer, spacer, spacer, washer, spacer, washer, spacer. Okay, so notice these washers have a little bit of a lip. There's like, it's like 2 washers stuck together of different sizes. This is going to go with the flat side up. It's going to drop into there, so that little edge is going to seat in to there, like that. Let me just tap that down and see if I can show you. Okay, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get this on camera, but I'll give it a try. Hang on a moment. Let's see. Okay, maybe you can see that the little washer seats through the hole at the base there. Just provides a little more of a seal, or keeps it in position a little better. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and just I like to work kind of assembly line fashion. I'm sure that you've A, noticed that, and B, I have probably talked about it before. I find it's easier to keep organized that way. That way everything goes together the same way. I'm just using a nut driver here to tap that little washer, make sure it is seating. Okay, now we're going to do O-ring, spacer, O-ring. And this is where that other subject I just mentioned I wanted to talk about comes in, and that is this right here. I used to be a big fan of a product called Green Slime, and it is a specific lubricant for shock absorber O-rings. It prevents the O-rings from expanding, and it's a very old product at this point, and maybe even a little dated. It was made by Associated, and Associated has gone through some ownership issues recently, and I'm not sure what their status is anymore. They've dropped a lot of the kits For example, they canceled their F1 car just a few years into producing it. They seem to be moving more toward a Traxxas model, a lot of almost ready to runs or ready to runs versus as many competition level kit cars. Maybe they're just focusing more on a couple specific classes. I'm not sure, but they've definitely gone through some changes and some issues. In any event, I am now using this product called 1-Up Blue O-ring grease, and it's specifically made, like the green slime, for keeping your O-rings healthy and not letting them swell. So I'm just using a little hex wrench to dab a little bit of this stuff. It's not cheap, it's not super expensive, but you don't want to just waste it willy-nilly. So you just want to coat these up and slide them on in. Okay, and then you're going to screw the cap on. Now, one of the things you want to be careful about is not screwing the cap in all the way, because it's going to clamp down on this little stack of O-rings and spacers, and you don't want it to compress at this point. You want to, and I'll explain in just a moment. Let me get this started. I don't want to cross thread that. That's really tight. I wonder if it's supposed to be like that. Yeah, I guess it is. It's just plastic. It's not metal. Okay. So as I said, don't tighten it down all the way. Just get it most of the way on. And then you want to slide your the shock shaft on. If you do it all the way, it's going to squeeze those O-rings just a little bit, and it's going to shrink that hole size there. I would also put a little bit of this lubricant on the threads and slide a little bit onto the shaft. You don't want to damage the O-rings with the sharp threads as you're pushing this through, so go nice and slow, and then you can just pull it through like that, and then we can tighten the cap down the rest of the way. Get it nice and tight, and that is done for this step. So I'm going to go ahead and do these. I'll just speed up the video here. Now, doing them all like that, all at once, is a lot easier on you, because you're going to have to clean your hands off to, do the shock shaft part, and then the cap, and then you're going to have to clean your hands off again and again and again. So load them all up like that. I did the first one for you in the order I did it so that you could see that process. But now it's easier just to go down the line this way. And now we're done with this. Definitely the kind of thing you want to have in your toolbox at the field in case you need to rebuild shocks. You don't want to be without that. I can clean off these threads. Okay, so I just want to go down the line here and confirm these are all nice and tight. Okay. So now we need to put on the eyelets. This is a fairly simple process. Okay, now there's a specific measurement we want here. And this is where your caliper comes in handy. So we want 27 millimeters from the cap to the eyelet. 27.04. That's really not worth trying to adjust for that 0.04, but why not? .11. So I went up when I tightened, which is unbelievable. I'm just going to try and get them all in that ballpark. It's not worth fighting over hundredths of a millimeter. What is important, though, is that you get them equal, or as close to equal as you possibly can. Back that off a hair. Okay. Okay. Excellent. So now it's time to fill the shocks, and I do not have the shock fluid that I want to use with these. It's on order. I should have it in about 48 hours, so I'm just going to pause the video here and pick up when that comes in. There's something that you should definitely have if you're going to be in the RC hobby. You really need a shock stand. You're going to be rebuilding shock absorbers all the time, hopefully, if you are not just bashing. If you're racing, that means you're going to be tuning and testing, and if you're testing, that means that you're going to be changing springs and changing the shock oil weight to tune your car, and that means you're going to need a shock stand to rebuild your shocks. So definitely get yourself one of these. There's several different types. There's the type that kind of look like test tube stands. I'm a big fan of this type. You've got these little reservoirs you can either drop some parts in or you can pour some fluid into. You've also got, you know, if nothing else, it's just an overflow for any shock fluid that comes over the top. And in my opinion, this is probably the hardest of all the different types or styles to knock over. But again, matter of taste, you know, suit yourself, get what you like, but get one. Okay, the shock oil came in. This is 800, I think it's CSF, I think is the, just however that's described. It's not done by weight. In any event, this is what was recommended in the build, 800 both front and rear, which is a little unusual, but you know, it's the build that someone won a national championship with, so I'm going to go with it. These shocks are a little different than most of the shocks I build. There's no screws vent on the shock cap, and they use membranes, which I think I've only used one other occasion. Generally, I use a method that is called emulsion. Don't ask. And so I'm just going to follow the directions on these step by step. It's fairly simple. I've done the build. I've done the seals and everything's nice and tight. So now it's time to start filling these. I'm just going to go one last time over these to make sure I didn't miss one or something like that. Okay, all good. So the first step is filling them up, and what you do when you fill a shock is you fill it most of the way up, and then you cycle the piston. You bring it up and then pull it down quickly to get any air that's trapped under the piston to come up above it. And then you do that once or twice, and then you let it sit, and you let all the bubbles rise to the top. And once there's no more, I mean, you'll see little bubbles like almost like a champagne glass. And then once you've done that, pull it back up to the top, not above the liquid, and snap it down again quick. And if you don't see any more bubbles come out, then you've cleared all the air from underneath the piston. At that point, you can top off the oil and then proceed with the instructions. If you do see any air bubbles, just let it sit a little while longer. And this is fairly thick fluid, so it may take a little longer than you're used to if you've been running 110s most of your RC career, or if you've never done this before at all. Just let it wait until it's done. Now, I am using different springs than what came with the kit. These were per the build. They are made by Ride. These are the part numbers if you want to follow this. You can find these online at a variety of online retailers. Just search them up. If you want to find the build sheet, and I highly recommend it, in fact, I would search out as many build sheets as you can find. With newer kits, it's kind of hard. For example, I've got that brand new Kyosho. It's also a 1/8 scale. It's a off-road buggy, and I'm planning to race that this fall and throughout the winter and spring. I'll probably race it for several years. It's definitely a keeper, but it's a new kit. It's a new model. It's the MP10E. According to Kyosho's website, it wasn't even supposed to be released until this September, but it's already out. A lot of retailers have them, and they're probably going to go fast because it's a very, very nicely done kit. It's got some really nice things about it, the way it's set up as far as battery placement and things that give you a very low center of gravity and are going to yield some, good handling. Anyway, watch my videos on that if you're interested. But the point I was making with that is that sometimes it's hard to find setup sheets from credible people or anybody at all. I highly recommend, number one, download the blank setup sheet, preferably the soft copy. If you travel with a Windows notepad or an iPad, it's easy to open them as a PDF and edit them, and then you can just keep soft copies. If you don't have a portable laptop or tablet, or if you don't want to bring one to the track, print multiple copies of the blank sheet. Fill in the generic stuff like your name and things like that, and any of the specs that you don't change, and then put in your changes and track the changes that you make. Every race you go to, there should be a setup sheet, even if you haven't made any changes, just so you know and get yourself into that habit of anytime you make a change to the car, you move something, you change to a different weight shock fluid, things like that, because you want to be able to see what those changes are getting you. Even if you think you're going to change it again in 10 or 15 minutes, you might not. You might get caught up with something else and leave it with that shock oil, and then you don't know what's in there. If you're trying to figure out what's not making the car handle the way you want it to, if you're trying to develop the vehicle and increase its performance, its reliability, make the handling the way you want to be able to track those changes, and that way you can analyze what benefit you're getting. So if you make a change in the shocks, or even a couple changes in your shocks, and you're racing at the same track that you race at regularly, and your lap times are noticeably up on the average, that's information that you want to hang on to so that you can recreate that again if need be. It also might be a point that you go, okay, it's getting better now, where can I go from here? It seemed the car was even though my lap times went up, I was having trouble carrying mid-corner speed, or I was having trouble keeping the car locked down on the exit. How can I get the rear end to settle down a bit? And then you make some more changes and you document them, and you see how your times improve, or if they go the opposite direction. You want to be able to see that, because otherwise the changes don't mean anything other than, I think it feels a little better, I think I'm going a little faster. But if you don't have any way to prove it, and you don't have any documentation, so you can't recreate what you did, there's nothing worse than showing up to the track and not knowing what shock oil's in your shocks. So it's like, okay, I've got 5 different levels of shock oil, and I'd like to change it and maybe stiffen the car up a little bit, but I don't know what's in there. So how do you know which direction to move? You've got 5 or 6 different bottles of fluid, and you don't know which weight is in the vehicle. So getting used to documenting your car is good. Just pencil, pen, a bunch of printed sheets, throw them in a bag, get yourself a clipboard, things like that. Just do it. Get that rhythm going, get used to it. Anyway, onward. I'm getting repetitive here, but it is very important. I can't emphasize that enough. Now, these caps do have a little hole in the side. They've got a little vent hole, just the one, and this is undoubtedly for bleeding. Now, the way they describe it is that you fill the shock fully, and bear in mind that when you put this membrane on here, you're going to lose a little oil, so have a rag handy. I usually will hold the shock kind of like wrapped in a rag, so that the oil doesn't run down all over the shock, and then I've got to do a lot of cleanup. But you don't want to have it bubbling over with oil, because as soon as you slide this little membrane on, you're going to lose some anyway. So get it almost to the top. Okay. For the correct CST value, please check the default setup sheet. Okay, they're referring to the weight. Extend the shock fully. In other words, it should, pull it all the way down. It should already be there. Move the shock absorber slowly up, let all the air bubbles out. I've already described this process. Okay, let me just slip ahead here to the bleeding. Okay, push the membrane into the shock cap. So basically, just do this. Make sure it is seated all the way down. And make sure that you can see the hole, because that's where it's going to vent. And it says, close the top, they kind of not very good translation here. Close top step by step, only 3/4. So, in other words, put this on about 3/4 of the way. Don't tighten it fully. Okay, and then it says bleed. Push the shock rod all the way in slowly to allow excessive oil to escape. With the shock rod fully in, close fullu. I'm assuming they mean fully. They have F-U-L-L-U here. Fulu the cap. Okay, so then we can go ahead, put on our spring, put on our shock base. So I'm going to go ahead and start this process. I think I'm going to have to get another one of these on order right away, because I'm going to use a good portion of one bottle just doing these 4. That is one of the things about 1/8 scale, is that it is considerably more expensive than 110 in every way there is. The tires are more expensive, the parts are more expensive, the amount of shock oil you use is probably double or more, things like that. So, you know, if you are thinking about getting into 1/8 scale, make sure you're prepared. A lot of people have no idea what they're really getting into financially when they decide they want to build and race RC cars. So slowly push this up, because you don't want to shoot fluid back out, and then draw it down quickly, and you should be able to see how there's a ring of little spirals of air bubbles. I'm going to go ahead and do that a second time. That should do it. We're going to let that sit until all those air bubbles, you're not going to really see them coming to the top and popping. Just wait until you can't see any more of them in the oil. They will dissipate. I'm going to bring this one in as close as I can. I'm not sure I'm going to have enough light here, but let me give it a try. You see how all that air comes out of those, out from under the cap through the holes. So while I am waiting for those, I'm going to go ahead and put the membranes into the other 3 caps. Okay, let's do it done. This is going to take a little while. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video here and come back in a minute. Okay, I have waited until all the air bubbles were gone, and I topped off the fluid on all 4 of those. Let's see. Okay, so fluid went down to about there. So I could probably fill 4 shocks 3 times with this bottle. That's not bad. I can wait a little while to order another one of those. So let's start the bleed process. So as I said, I like to kind of wrap one in a towel. Okay, I just went down to where there was contact on the, and then went back just a hair, and you can't really see because it's down under here, but I'm going to hold this so that the cap is at the top. The hole is pointing upwards, and I am slowly pushing the piston upwards. And there's a few little air bubbles coming out. Because there's still some air trapped in there. Okay, now let's test the shock. Let's see what we've got. Okay, it's not bad. Okay, that's pretty much what we would call a dead damper or zero damper. There's no rebound. Rebound is okay, now see, if I pull it down all the way, it doesn't do anything. If I push it up quickly, you can see there's a little bit of rebound, so it's not quite zero, but it's not a lot of rebound, and it's not instantaneous. So if I do that again, see, must be the membrane doing its thing. Now there's another type of membrane. These are the stock membranes that come with the kit. I don't remember where I heard about these. I did not, they were not in the build that I'm doing. But someone had mentioned them. I just don't remember where. It's a different type of membrane. It's basically got this like honeycomb thing here, so the membrane doesn't collapse. It's a lot more solid, and it's probably going to give more rebound. In any event, not something I'm really worried about at the moment. I may try those at some point and see what the difference is, if I can tell. So I'm going to go ahead and do another one of these for you. I'm just going backwards until I feel it settle. There we go. Okay, it's touched down. So now I'm going to hold it with the bleed hole facing upwards to let any air that's trapped come out. Slowly. Okay. Now, the goal is to have the shocks be as close to identical as possible in their amount of rebound, if any. So if you have one with a lot of rebound, rebuild it, rebleed it. You don't need to like push all the air out, but this one's got a little more rebound, but not a lot. Yeah, it's a little quicker to move, but again, not very fast and about the same amount as the other one. So I'm going to see how the rest turn out and then decide if I need to do anything about it. But they were close enough for government inspection. So again, I'm just tightening these down until I feel that membrane touching down between the cap and the shock top. And then identify the hole, point that up, because the air will rise toward that membrane. That's weird. There we go. I must have had it a little bit too much. Should have backed off a quarter turn or so. Let's see how that comes out. I may need to top that off again and rebleed. Oh, it's right about the same. Yeah. Okay, good. This is a fairly easy process. Seems to be getting a consistent result. Now, when you're doing this and you've pushed the piston all the way up, hold it with one of your fingers. Don't let it come back down as you're tightening up the cap. Otherwise, it will draw air in. Okay, these two were identical, and these two were the same. So I'm going to go ahead and call these front and those two rear. Just going to make sure I've got all four caps fully tightened. Okay, I think I'm good to go there. I usually put the color mark on the bottom. No reason, just the way I've done it. So these are going to require some adjustment right off the bat. You'll notice this little edge right here that sticks out. You're going to put that in this groove here, and it snaps in like that. Sorry if some of that was off screen. All I'm doing is adjusting the preload. I'm just going to go, there's no need to have you watch me do this. Basically, I'm just dialing down the shock until it's touching the spring. I'm not adding any compression against the spring. I've just got it where it meets. That is kind of odd that the spring is so short that there's no extra space, but such as it is. Now, one thing I can do, if this seems like it's too long, if I've got if I want the shock to be a little shorter, I could put a spacer or two underneath the piston, and that would shorten the length of the shock and would basically add preload or move the spring cap higher before it makes contact. I do have some adjustment left, but not a lot. So anyway, we'll see. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the video here. I'm going to finish the shocks, and then it's time to mount them onto the car. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please click like, and please subscribe to my channel.